The night my husband told me not to come back home until I proved I wasn't worthless. I drove to a dying roadside my parents had left me and discovered a hidden cabinet that turned everything upside down. By the end of that week, the man who threw me out was begging to talk. My brother stopped answering calls, and the place everyone pitied me for inheriting turned out to be worth more than anyone could imagine. I'm 42 years old, and until last winter I thought I understood my life. Then one phone call at 6:47 in the morning changed everything. A deputy told me my parents had died in a crash on a frozen stretch of road just outside town. It was quick, he said. They didn't suffer. People always say that like it helps. My husband's first question wasn't how I was. It was whether the will had been updated. Within 2 days, he had spreadsheets out, calculating what everything might be worth. My older brother received 3 fully rented townhouses in the city. I received a rundown roadside and off an old highway, 10 rooms, failing business, and land nobody had cared about in years. Just talk to your brother, my husband said. Swap or get bought out. Don't just accept this. I told him they hadn't even been buried yet. He called me useless. Not loudly, not angrily, just casually, like he was commenting on the weather, and somehow that made it worse. The funeral passed in a blur of polite smiles and controlled grief. My brother handled everything perfectly: flowers, speeches, arrangements. People called him strong, responsible. I stood beside him, quiet, wearing my mother's coat, feeling like I had somehow already fallen behind. When the will was read, it was exactly what we expected, balanced on paper. Income for him, liability for me. But there was one thing no one else got: a sealed letter my father had left specifically for me. I didn't open it. Not then. 3 nights later, after another argument, my husband told me to leave. Said I should stay somewhere, anywhere, until I figured things out and came back with a plan that made sense. So I packed 2 bags and drove to the inn. It was worse than I remembered. The sign flickered. The office door stuck. The air inside was cold but not abandoned. There was a faint smell of wood oil, fresh, recent. That didn't make sense. I walked through the rooms slowly. One of them had a book left open on the nightstand, a pair of reading glasses beside it, my father's. He had been here. Recently. I barely slept. And sometime after 2 in the morning, while walking back through the office, I noticed a wooden cabinet behind the desk. It looked cared for, polished, out of place. The key was exactly where my father always kept spare keys, hidden in plain sight. When I opened it, I found years of notebooks, maps, documents, his handwriting on everything. And underneath it all, a folder with my name. Inside were property records, deeds, adjacent parcels of land I had never heard of, one after another purchased quietly over nearly 20 years. I sat on the floor, trying to understand what I was looking at. Then I opened the letter. He wrote that he knew how it would look, that my brother needed something visible, something immediate, but I needed something longer, something that required patience. He told me not to sell, not to rush, and most importantly, not to trust my husband with any of it. The next morning, I called an old family friend who used to work with the state. That's when I learned the truth. A new highway extension had been quietly planned for years, and the central interchange, the point where everything connected, was set to run directly through that worthless property. Not just the inn. All the land around it. Land I now owned. 36 acres in total. The estimated value. Over $6 million. I didn't say anything to anyone, not yet. My husband started calling, texting, apologizing, then demanding, then apologizing again. My brother reached out once, offering to help take the property off my hands for a fraction of what it was worth. I told them both I needed time. Instead, I hired a lawyer. Turns out, while I had been managing our home, my husband had quietly taken out a line of credit against it, without fully explaining it to me. Tens of thousands already spent. That was the moment everything shifted. Not emotionally. Practically, I stopped reacting. I started deciding. A week later, there was a public meeting about the highway project. I sat quietly in the middle rows while officials presented maps and numbers. When they announced the acquisition list, they read out the property tied to the inn, along with all adjacent parcels under single ownership. 36 acres. The room shifted. People started looking around. My husband found me first, then my brother. Neither of them spoke. The official confirmed the estimated compensation, around $6.4 million, pending final evaluation. I didn't react. I just wrote down a few notes like it was any other meeting. Afterward, my husband approached me in the parking lot. "We need to talk," he said. "We will," I replied, "through attorneys." And for the first time in years, he didn't have an answer. The months that followed were quieter. The divorce was filed. The financial accounts were untangled. The debt he had created was recovered through the settlement. The state finalized the purchase 6 months later. After everything, taxes, fees, legal costs, I was left with just over $5 million. I kept a small portion of the land, built a modest home there, nothing extravagant, just enough. My brother and I talk occasionally now, not close, but honest. My husband moved on, so did I. But sometimes, late at night, I think about that cabinet, about the years my father spent planning something I didn't even know to look for. He never said it out loud. But he didn't have to. Because in the end, the place everyone thought was my failure was actually the proof that he had trusted me all along.